is the glorification of the Lord. Naturally, the glorification of his devotees automatically follows. End of proof. Is the glory. Text 26. Shri Sukha Uvacha Ya Esa Utan Apada Mana Vasyan Nu Varnita Vamsa Priya Ratasyapi Nibodha Nripa Satama. Sukadeva Goswami continued, O best of kings, King Parikshit, I have now finished telling about the descendants of the first son of Swayambhuva Manu, Uttanapada. I shall now try to relate the activities of the descendants of Priyavrata, the second son of Swayambhuva Manu. Please hear them attentively. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Dhruva Maharaj was the son of King Uttanapada, and as far as the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj or King Uttanapada are concerned, their activities have been described up to the point of the Prachetas. Now, Sri Sukadeva Goswami desires to describe the descendants of Maharaj Priyavrata, the second son of Swayambhuva Manu. Text 27. Although Maharaj Priyavrata received instructions from the great sage Narada, he still engaged in ruling the earth. After fully enjoying material possessions, he divided his property among his sons. He then attained a position by which he could return home back to Godhead. Well, it means the position of complete surrender to the Lord, with no desire for sense gratification. Text 28. My dear king, in this way, after hearing the transcendental messages of the Supreme Personality Godhead and his devotees from the great sage Maitreya, Vidura was overwhelmed with ecstasy. With tears in his eyes, he immediately fell down at the lotus feet of his guru, his spiritual master. He then fixed the Supreme Personality Godhead within the core of his heart. What a wonderful statement that is. Purport: this is a sign of associating with great devotees. A devotee takes instructions from a liberated soul and is thus overwhelmed by ecstasy from the transcendental pleasure. As stated by Prahlad Maharaj, I sammatish tavad urukraman grihim. Sprisati anartapagamo yad arta. Mahiyasam pada rajo bishakam. Nikishchananam na brinita yavat. Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.32. Translation, and then we'll continue purport. One cannot become a perfect devotee of the Lord without having touched the lotus feet of a great devotee. One who has nothing to do with this material world is called nishkinchana. The process of self-realization and the path home, back to Godhead, means surrendering to the bona fide spiritual master and taking the dust of his lotus feet on one's head. Thus, one advances on the path of transcendental realization. Vidura had this relationship with Maitreya, and he attained the results. Text 29. Sri Vidura said, O great mystic, O greatest of all devotees, by your causeless mercy, I have been shown the path of liberation from this world of darkness. By following this path, a person liberated from the material world can return home back to Godhead. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. This material world is called Tama, dark, and the spiritual world is called light. The Vedas enjoin that everyone should try to get out of the darkness and go to the kingdom of light. The information of that kingdom of light can be attained through the mercy of a self-realized soul. One also has to get rid of all material desires. As soon as one frees himself from the material desires and associates with a liberated person, the path back home, back to Godhead, is clear. Text number 30. Sukadeva Goswami continued. Vidura thus offered obeisances unto the great sage Maitreya, and taking his permission, started for the city of Hastinapura to see his own kinsman, although he had no material desires. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. When a saintly person wants to see his kinsman, he has no material desire to see them. He simply wants to give them some instructions so that they can benefit. Vidura belonged to the royal family of the Kauravas, and although he knew that all the family members were destroyed at the Battle of Kurukshetra, he nonetheless wanted to see his elder brother, Dhritarashtra, to see if he could deliver Dhritarashtra from the clutches of Maya. Oh, well, that's very nice. When a great saintly person like Vidura sees his relatives, he desires only to deliver them from the clutches of Maya. Vidura thus offered his respectful obeisances to his spiritual master and departed from the city of Hastinapura, the kingdom of the Kauravas. Text 31. O king, those who hear these topics about kings and who are completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead obtain without difficulty a long life, wealth, good reputation, good fortune, and ultimately the opportunity to return home back to Godhead. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the fourth canto, 31st chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Narada Instructs the Prachetas. So that is the end of this part of the end of the fourth canto. Haribol. Thank you very much. And now we'll continue in the next book. Wow, that's a pretty thick book. Okay. Chapter 1. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, Chapter 1. Activities of Maharaja Priyavrata. This chapter describes how King Priyavrata enjoyed royal opulence and majesty, and then returned to full knowledge. King Priyavrata was detached from worldly opulence, and then he became attached to his kingdom. But finally, he again became detached from material enjoyment and thus achieved liberation. When King Parikshit heard about this, he was struck with wonder, but he was somewhat bewildered as how a devotee with no attachment for material enjoyment could later become attached to it. That's interesting. Thus, in astonishment, he questioned Sukadeva Goswami about this. In response to the king's inquiries, Sukadeva Goswami said that devotional service, being transcendental, cannot be deviated by any material influences. Priyavrata had received transcendental knowledge from the instructions of Narada, and therefore he did not want to enter a materialistic life of enjoyment in a kingdom. He accepted the kingdom, however, at the request of such superior demigods as Lord Brahma and Lord Indra, the king of heaven. Everything is under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Controller, and everyone must work accordingly. Just as a bull is controlled by a rope tied to its nose. All conditioned souls are forced to work under the spells of the modes of nature. A civilized man, therefore, works according to the institution of Varna and Ashram. Even in materialistic life, however, no one is free to act. Everyone is compelled to accept a certain type of body offered by the Supreme Lord and thus be allotted different grades of happiness and distress. Therefore, even if one artificially leaves home and goes to the forest, he again becomes attached to the materialistic life. Family life is compared to a fortress for practicing sense control. When the senses are controlled, one may live either at home or in the forest. There is no difference. When Maharaj Priyavrata, following the instruction of Lord Brahma, accepted the royal throne, his father Manu left home for the forest. Maharaj Priyavrata then married Bharismati, the daughter of Vishwakarma. In the womb of Bharismati, he begot 10 sons, named Agnidra, Idmajiva, Yajnabahu, Mahavira, Hiranyareta, Grita, Krista, Savana, Medhatiti, Vitihotra, and Kavi. He also begot one daughter whose name was Urjavati. Maharaj Priyavrata lived with his wife and family for many thousands of years. The impression from the rims of Maharaj Priyavata's chariot wheels created 7 oceans and 7 islands. Of the 10 sons of Priyavrata, 3 sons named Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana accepted sannyasa, the fourth order of life, and the remaining 7 sons became the rulers of the 7 islands. Maharaj Priyavrata also had a second wife, in whom he begot 3 sons, named Uttama, Raivata, and Tamasa. All of them were elevated to the post of Manu. Sukadeva Goswami thus described how Maharaj Priyavrata achieved liberation. Okay, so text number 1. King Parikshit inquired from Sukadeva Goswami, O great sage, why did King Priyavrata, who was a great self-realized devotee of the Lord, remain in household life? Well, that's a good question. Which is the root cause of bondage, of karma, or fruitive activities, and which defeats the mission of human life. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In the 4th canto, Srila Sukadeva Goswami explains that Narada Muni perfectly instructed King Priyavrata about the mission of human life. The mission of human life is to realize oneself and then gradually to go back home, back to Godhead. There it is. That's the purpose of life. Since Narada Muni instructed the king fully on this subject, why did he again enter household life, which is the main cause of material bondage? Maharaj Parikshit was greatly astonished that King Priyavrata remained in his household life, especially since he was not only a self-realized soul, but also a first-class devotee of the Lord. A devotee actually has no attraction for household life. But surprisingly, King Priyavrata enjoyed household life very much. One may argue, why is it wrong to enjoy household life? Well, that's a good question. The reply is that in household life, one becomes bound by the results of fruitive activities. The essence of household life is sense enjoyment. And as long as one engrosses his mind in working hard for sense enjoyment, one becomes bound by the reactions of fruitive activities. Wow. Let me read that again. The essence of household life is sense enjoyment. And as long as one engrosses his mind in working hard for sense enjoyment, one becomes bound by the reactions of fruitive activities. This ignorance of this ignorance of self-realization is the greatest defeat in human life. The human form of life is especially meant for getting out of the bondage of fruitive activities. But as long, but as long as one is forgetful of his life's mission and acts like an ordinary animal, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. He must continue his conditioned life of material existence. Such a life is called Swarupa Vishmita, forgetfulness of one's real conditional position. Conditional position means what one is really meant to be. Okay. Therefore, in Vedic civilization, one is trained in the very beginning of life as a brahmachari. A brahmachari must execute austerities and refrain from sex indulgence. Therefore, if one is completely trained in the principles of brahmacharya, he generally does not enter household life. He is then called Naistika Brahmachari, which indicates total celibacy. King Parikshit was thus astonished that the great King Priyavrata, although trained in the principles of Naistika Brahmacharya, entered household life. The words Bhagavata Atmarama are very significant in this verse. If one is self-satisfied, as is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is called Bhagavata Atmarama. There are different types of satisfaction. Karmis are satisfied in their fruitive activities. Jnanis are satisfied to merge into the effulgence of Brahman. The devotees are satisfied by to engage in the Lord's service. The Lord is self-satisfied because he is fully opulent, and one who is satisfied by serving him is called Bhagavata Atmarama. Manusyanam Sahasresu, out of many thousands of persons, one may endeavor for liberation, and of many thousands of persons attempting to become liberated, one may achieve this liberation from the anxieties of material existence and become self-satisfied. Even that satisfaction, however, is not the ultimate satisfaction. That Jnanis and the Karmis have desires, as do the yogis, but devotees have no desires. Satisfaction in the service of the Lord is called akarma, freedom from desire. And this is the ultimate satisfaction. Therefore, Maharaja Parikshit inquired, how could one who was fully satisfied on the highest platform be satisfied with family life? Okay. The word, the word parabhava in this verse is also significant. When one is satisfied in family life, he is doomed because he must already have forgotten his relationship with the Lord. Wow. Prahlad Maharaj describes how the activities of family life implicate one more and more. Atmapatam griham andakupam. Household life is like a dark well. If one falls into this well, his spiritual death is assured. How Priyavrata Maharaj remained a liberated Paramahamsa even within family life is described in the next verse. Text 2. Devotees are certainly liberated persons. Therefore, O greatest of the Brahmanas, they cannot possibly be absorbed in family affairs. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that by executing devotional service to the Lord, one can understand the transcendental position of the living being and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be understood by any means except bhakti. The Lord confirms this in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.14.21. Bhakyaham ekaya graya. Only by executing devotional service can one appreciate me. Similarly, in Bhagavad Gita 1855, Lord Krishna says, Bhaktya mam abhijananti. Simply by discharging devotional service, one can understand me. Thus, for a bhakta to become attached to family affairs is impossible, since a bhakta and his associates are liberated. Everyone is searching after ananda or bliss, but in the material world, there can never be any bliss. It is only possible in devotional service. There it is. Attachment for family affairs and devotional service are incompatible. Whoa, Prabhupada, Haribol. Therefore, Maharaj Parikshit was somewhat surprised to hear that Maharaj Priyavrata was simultaneously attached to devotional service and to family life. Okay, now this is very intriguing. Let's see why Maharaj Priyavrata was simultaneously attached to devotional service and to family life. Text 3. Elevated Mahatmas who have taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality Godhead are fully satiated by the shade of those lotus feet. Their consciousness cannot possibly become attached to family members. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Narottama Dasa Thakura Sung. Nitai Pada Kamala. Koti Chandra Susitala. Ye Chaya Ya Jagat Judaya. He describes the shade of the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda as being so nice and cooling that all materialists who are always in the blazing fire of material activities may come under the shade of his lotus feet and be fully relieved and satiated. This distinction between family life and spiritual life. Family life and spiritual life can be experienced by any person who has undergone tribulations of living with the family. One who comes under the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord never becomes attracted by the activities of family life. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 259, Param Dristva Nivartate, one gives up lower engagements when he experiences a higher taste. Thus, one becomes detached from family life as soon as he comes under the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Text number 4. The king continued, O great Brahmana, this is my great doubt. How was it possible for a person like King Priyavrata, who was so attached to wife, children, home, to achieve the topmost infallible perfection and Krishna consciousness? Well, the answer has to be, I think, because of his engagement in devotional service. Let's see what it says. King Parikshit wondered how a person so attached to wife, children, and home could become so perfectly Krishna conscious. Prahlad Maharaja said, Matirna Krishna Parata Swato Va Mito Vipadyita Griha Ratam. A Grihavrata, one who has taken a vow to execute family duties, has no chance to become Krishna conscious. This is because most Grihavratas are guided by sense gratification and therefore gradually glide down to the darkest regions of material existence. Andagopir Vishatam Tamishram. How can they possibly become perfect in Krishna consciousness? Maharaj Parikshit asked Sukadeva Goswami to resolve this great doubt. Text number 5. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, what you have said is correct. The glories of the Supreme Personality Godhead, who is praised in eloquent transcendental verses by such exalted personalities as Brahma, are very pleasing to great devotees and liberated persons. One who is attached to the nectarian honey of the Lord's lotus feet and whose mind is always absorbed in his glories may sometimes be checked by some impediment, but he still never gives up the exalted position he has acquired. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sri Sukadeva Goswami accepted both of the king's propositions that a person who is advanced in Krishna consciousness cannot embrace materialistic life again, and that one who has embraced materialistic life cannot take up Krishna consciousness at any stage of his existence. Although accepting both these statements, Sukadeva Goswami qualified them by saying that a person who has once absorbed his mind in the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead may sometimes be influenced by impediments, but he still does not give up his exalted devotional position. Well, that's nice. According to Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur, there are two kinds of impediments to devotional service. The first is an offense at the lotus feet of the Vaishnava. This is called Vaishnava Aparada. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu warned his devotees not to commit Vaishnava Aparada, which he described as the mad elephant offense. Well, what does that mean, a mad elephant offense? He's going to explain it now. When a mad elephant enters a beautiful garden, it destroys everything, leaving a barren field. Similarly, the power of Vaishnava Aparada is so great that even an advanced devotee becomes almost devoid of his spiritual assets if he commits it. So Vaishnava Aparada means uh, uh, means saying and doing things that are negative to a genuine devotee. In other words, insulting a devotee, a genuine devotee. Or offensive behavior toward a genuine devotee of the Lord. Since Krishna consciousness is eternal, it cannot be destroyed altogether. But advancement may be checked for the time being. Thus, Vaishnava Aparada, in other words, committing an offense against a Vaishnava, is one kind of impediment to devotional service. Yeah, if you insult a genuine devotee or do something that is detrimental to a genuine devotee, it is called Vaishnava Aparada. Sometimes, however, the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee desires to impede one's devotional service. Okay, that's a question mark. Why would they want to do that? For example, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha were formerly Jaya and Vijaya, the gatekeepers in Vaikuntha. But by the desire of the Lord, they became his enemies for 3 lives. Thus, the desire of the Lord is another kind of impediment. But in both cases, the pure devotee, once advanced in Krishna consciousness, cannot be lost, following the orders of his superiors, Swayambhuva and Lord Brahma. Priyavrata accepted family life. But this did not mean he lost his position in devotional service. Krishna consciousness is perfect and eternal, and therefore it cannot be lost under any circumstances. Because the material world is full of obstructions to advancement in Krishna consciousness, there may appear to be many impediments. Yet, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, declares in Bhagavad Gita 9:31, Konteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. Once one has taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, he cannot be lost. In this verse, the word Shivatamam is very significant. Shivatamam means the most auspicious. The devotional path is so auspicious that a devotee cannot be lost under any circumstances. This is described in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita by the Lord himself. Partanai veha namutra vinasastasya vidyate. My dear Arjuna, for a devotee, there is no question of being lost, either in this life or in the next. Bhagavad Gita 640. In Bhagavad Gita 6.43, the Lord clearly explains how this is so. Tatratam buddhi samyogam labhate porva dehikam yatate cha tato bhuya samsido kuru nandana. By order of the Lord, a perfect devotee sometimes comes to this material world like an ordinary human being. Because of his previous practice, such a perfect devotee naturally becomes attached to devotional service, apparently without cause. Despite all kinds of impediments due to surrounding circumstances, he automatically perseveres in devotional service and gradually advances until he once again becomes perfect. Bilmavangala Thakura had been an advanced devotee in his previous life. But in his next life, he became greatly fallen and was attracted to a prostitute. Suddenly, however, his entire behavior was changed by the words of the very prostitute who had so much attracted him, and he became a great devotee. In the lives of exalted devotees, there are many such instances, proving that once one has taken to the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, he cannot be lost. Konteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranasyati. The fact is, however, that one becomes a devotee when he is completely freed from all reactions to sinful life. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7:28, Ye sam twantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva mohanirmukta bhajanti mam dritavrataha. Very prominent verse. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, and who are freed from the duality of illusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. On the other hand, as Prahlad Maharaj said, Matirna Krishna Paramam Swato Va Mito Vipadyeta Griha Vratanam. A person who is too attached to materialistic life, home, family, wife, children, and so on, cannot develop Krishna consciousness. These apparent contradictions are resolved in the life of a devotee by the grace of the Supreme Lord, and therefore a devotee is never bereft of his position on the path of liberation, which is described in this verse as Shivatmam Padavim. Well, let's stop there for a minute because it's a very interesting statement. Matir na Krishna Paratasvatova Mito Vipad Ita Griha Ratanam. A person is too much attached to materialistic family life, home, family, wife, children, and so on, cannot develop Krishna consciousness. That's a fact. One has to give up that type of materialistic family life. Otherwise, it's a great uh, obstacle to becoming Krishna conscious. It doesn't mean that you give up family, but you have to give up materialistic family life. So the family life should be Krishna consciousness. But if it's materialistic family life, one is in a very, very dangerous situation. So to become Krishna conscious, you have to give up that type of family life. But there is family life in which both all the members of the family are Krishna conscious. That is something you don't have to give up. That's why it says there, a person is too attached to materialistic family life, home, family, wife, children, and so on, cannot develop Krishna consciousness. That's a fact. But what if all the members of the family are Krishna conscious and their uh, home life is always connected to Krishna, chanting and uh, you know engaging always in Krishna conscious activities? That's different. Okay, text number 6. Sukadeva Goswami continued, my dear king, Prince Priyavrata was a great devotee because he sought the lotus feet of Narada, his spiritual master, and thus achieved the highest perfection and transcendental knowledge. With advanced knowledge, he always engaged in discussing spiritual subjects and did not divert his attention to anything else. The spiritual subjects, the prince's father then asked him to take charge of ruling the world. He tried to convince Priyavata that this was his duty as indicated in the revealed scriptures. Prince Priyavata, however, was continuously practicing bhakti yoga by constantly remembering the supreme personality of Godhead. Thus, engaging all his senses in the service of the Lord. Therefore, although the order of his father could not be rejected, the prince did not welcome it. Thus, he very conscientiously raised the question of whether he might be diverted from devotional service by accepting the responsibility of ruling over the world. Well, that's a pretty big service, ruling over the entire world. It is very possible that one can be, uh, one can deviate from Krishna consciousness by having such a powerful position in life. It's sort of begging the issue that one will fall down by being so exalted materially. Purport. Srila Narottam Dasa Thakur sang Shadiya Vaishnava Seva Nistara Payeche Tekeva. Without serving the lotus feet of a pure Vaishnava or spiritual master, no one has ever attained perfect liberation from material bondage. Prince Priyavrata regularly served the lotus feet of Narada, and thus the prince perfectly understood transcendental subjects in truth. Sa Tattva. The word Sa Tattva means that Priyavata knew all the facts about the spirit soul, the Supreme Personality Godhead, and the relationship between the spirit soul and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he also knew all about the material world and the relationship of the spirit soul and the Supreme Lord within the material world. Thus, the prince decided to engage himself only in rendering service to the Lord. Well, that's a good decision. When Priyavata's father, Swayambhuva Manu, requested him to accept the responsibility of ruling over the world, he did not welcome the suggestion. This is the symptom of a great liberated devotee. Even though engaged in worldly affairs, he does not take pleasure in them, but remains always absorbed in the Lord's service. While thus serving the Lord, he deals externally with worldly affairs without being affected. Well, that's a very important statement. For example, although he has no attraction for children, he cares for them and educates them to become devotees. Similarly, he speaks to his wife with affectionate words, but he is not attached to her. By rendering devotional service, a devotee acquires all the good qualities of the Supreme Lord. Lord Krishna has 16,000 wives, all of them very beautiful. And although he dealt with each of them as a beloved husband, he was not attracted or attached to any of them. In the same way, although a devotee may enter family life and act very affectionately toward his wife and children, he is never attached to these activities. Well, what does that mean exactly? What does that mean exactly? That means that although he has family, wife, children, but he follows strictly the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, especially no illicit sex. What does that mean? No sex for sense gratification, only engaging in sex for procreation. So, therefore, a devotee may enter family life and act very affectionately toward his wife and children. He is never attached to these activities. Yeah, he never will engage in sex for sense gratification. He never will avoid following all the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, it says in the Vedas, Yasya deve parabhaktir yata deve tata guru. Taisyaite katita hi artak prakasante mahatmana. If one has unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord and the spiritual master, the essence of all Vedic knowledge is revealed to him. Is a very important verse. Svetashvatara Upanishad 6.23. A devotee always thinks of the Lord continuously while chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. The words Hare and the words Krishna and Hare immediately remind him of all the Lord's activities. since his entire life is engaged in the service of the Lord. A devotee cannot forget the Lord at any time, just as an ordinary man always engages his mind in material activities. A devotee always engages his mind in spiritual activities. This is called Brahma Satra, or meditating upon the Supreme Lord always. Prince Priyavrata was perfectly initiated into this practice by Sri Narada. And in the same way, Srila Prabhupada has perfectly initiated his devotees into the practice of Krishna consciousness. Text, oh, well, I think we're over time now. So we will stop there. Are there any questions or comments anyone would like to make? Any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna, Harivilas Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Yes.
I have a question. We talk about not being so stressed on family life for material enjoyment and be in Krishna consciousness uh, as a family as well. But the Pandavas, when they dealt with all their obstacles, they dealt with it together with Krishna's blessing, of course, but they were together. They were never apart dealing with all the obstacles. Can you please explain that? Thank you.
Well, when you say they were always together, is that something good or something bad?
It's something good, but they were not apart, they were with each other to deal with all the obstacles. So in material world, don't we need that, our family, to deal with obstacles? I'm a little confused. That's why I'm asking you the question. Thank you.
Okay, that's a valid question. Well, when you say they were always together, well, they were always together in practicing Krishna consciousness and following Krishna's instructions, not always together to engage in sense gratification and ignoring Krishna's instructions. So, always being together and following Krishna's instructions in devotional service, that's wonderful. That's good. That's a real family. But always being together and enjoying sense gratification, that is abominable, horrible. And one should not stay in that situation. So, in that situation, one can reject his family. But when the family is all Krishna conscious, there's no reason to reject them. But one does not engage in mundane activities with the family. Everyone is engaged in the family in devotional service. The father, the mother, the children, they're all chanting Hare Krishna and engaged in devotional service. So that is an ideal situation. Now, there are all different levels of association with a family. So one level is everyone in the family are completely Krishna conscious. Another level is you're Krishna conscious, but your family isn't. Or you're Krishna conscious, only half of your family, or only one person in your family is Krishna conscious, and the rest are all, non-devotees. So in situations like that, One should not be attached to family life. One should be detached. Now, uh, detached, what does that mean? One avoids the association of family members who are not Krishna conscious. He might, one is respectful, but he does not closely have connection to such family members. So, family means not only mother and father, but there's also uncles and aunties and cousins and so many different personalities that may be members of a family. So, a devotee is respectful to all people, and that includes his family members. But when the family members are not Krishna conscious, he will avoid the association of such family members. And if he's forced to associate with them, it is without engaging in any sense gratification. Like, for example, let's say there's a wedding. So, when there's a wedding, usually people will go to the church, and uh, the person who is the uh, going to do the marriage, in other words, the priest, everybody is quiet, and the priest is saying his mantras, and he is, uh, trying also usually to give a little bit of good advice to the bride and groom, and then after all the mantras and advice, now the bride and groom go to have a party. There's going to be a dinner with all the relatives in some place that's rented or in a big house or something. And then the next part, the genuine, let's say, priest leaves the uh, celebration because he knows they're going to probably, you know, start to dance and chant and talk nonsense, maybe even take in some intoxication like beer or whiskey. And so the devotee will, knowing what's going to happen after the ceremony is over, leaves, you know, because even though they're family members, they have these bad habits. And out of respect, he may have come for the, let's say, religious part of the family celebration, but leaves when the nonsense part of family association starts. Right. So as soon as all the mantras are finished and the consecration of the husband and wife finished, then usually the devotee says, "Well, thank you very much, but I have something else to do," and he leaves because he knows what's going to happen. They're going to become uh, engaged in maybe drinking liquor or wine and talking nonsense and dancing and fighting and who knows what. So he leaves that part of the family celebration because it's not Krishna conscious at all. During the marriage ceremony, yeah, the devotee might be there listening to the lecture of the priests and hearing all the mantras and so forth. And then as soon as the uh, husband, the new husband and wife are consecrated, uh, then he leaves because he knows what's going to happen next. They're going to have a big party. Some idiot will probably bring some liquor and maybe meat and things like that. And there's going to be, a a nonsense activities. So going to a marriage ceremony, yeah, the wedding might go because they're family members and witness the marriage ceremony. But as soon as the marriage ceremony is over, he can quietly leave, knowing well that the next part of the uh, not ceremony, but the marriage ceremony is marriage activity is going to be mostly mundane and nonsense. Yeah, and that's probably 100% true. As soon as that, well, let's say they're all devotees. Okay, well, they're not going to have liquor. They are going to chant, maybe dance, but they will not violate the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. But a mundane family, well, they think that, look, we want to have, some liquor, we want to have some dancing and music, and the whole night is just mundane talk. So the devotee leaves immediately, knowing very well that that part of the family experience is nonsense. Okay, so I think we'll stop right there. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask? Any questions?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glorious to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Guru Maharaj, I wanted to ask, it's so difficult to cut the family attachment. It's like it's like a knot. So even though you are miles apart from them, still it's like you have obligations, you have duties. So how should a devotee think? How should this attachment becomes detachment?
Well, it's not complicated. Uh, when you're always chanting Hare Krishna, they don't have time to go to a family reunion where they're going to have liquor and chanting nonsense songs and talking nonsense all night long. You might go for, like, the ceremony of marriage, that takes place. And as soon as the pundit or the priest is over, then everyone is going to go to some kind of banquet and do nonsense. So you can very quietly slip away and avoid that part of this so-called celebration. So you only experience the priest saying mantras and consecrating the marriage, but you don't go to the big feast after the marriage where there's going to be a lot of nonsense talk and maybe even drinking liquor and and talking nonsense. So it's very difficult to walk away from the mundane celebration part of the marriage. But we should. We shouldn't sit there and watch people eating meat and talking nonsense, maybe drinking wine or liquor and acting in very, let's say, sinful ways or mundane ways. Uh, so, out of respect for the family, you might go and experience the marriage ceremony where there's a priest and he's chanting some mantras, giving some maybe good advice to the couple, or just chanting mantras. Okay, but then you should quietly leave because the next part is definitely not going to be good. When I say good, it's not. It's going to not be full of Krishna consciousness. It's going to be full of mundane talk and even intoxication and uh, it's a waste of time for the devotee. Does that answer your question, Mataji?
Yes, Guru Maharaj. Actually, what I was thinking is that it's like complete rejection is very hard. So how do we kick off, especially with the very close family members? How do we kick off complete detachment instead of attachment?
Well, it's by always engaging in Krishna conscious activities and not uh, being attracted to mundane, let's say, part of family association. So if you go to a marriage uh, program, okay, well, there's some priest, there are mantras being said, and there are vows that are being taken. And then after everything is over, there's a lineup of people that go and congratulate the bride and groom, maybe give them some presents. And then they're going to have a banquet, usually. You can skip the banquet because you don't know what's going to happen. They might have champagne, they might be making toasts with the champagne and just talking mundane things. So you stay for the spiritual part of the marriage and avoid the celebration part of the marriage. If the most of the people in this, are not Krishna conscious, so you're there for the spiritual part, and you're absent for the mundane part. So you haven't really ignored your family, but you avoided the mundane activity part of the family.
Got it, Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. And but believe me, they won't even know you left. You just quietly leave. Okay. So any other questions or comments? Okay, my dear devotees, thank you very much. Have a very good day today. And our takeaway for today is the following. If one has unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord and the spiritual master, the essence of all Vedic knowledge is revealed to him or her. Let me read that again. If one has unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord and the spiritual master, the essence of all Vedic knowledge is revealed to him. This is a verse from the Sritasvatara Upanishad, 6.23. Okay, and then it says, while a devotee always thinks of the Lord continuously while chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, the words Krishna and Hare immediately remind him of all the Lord's activities. Since his entire life is engaged in the service of the Lord, a devotee cannot forget the Lord at any time. Just as an ordinary man always engages his mind in material activities, a devotee always engages his mind in spiritual activities. This is called Brahma Satra, or meditating upon the Supreme Lord always. Okay, so that is our takeaway for today. You should always be thinking of Krishna and Krishna consciousness and chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Why? Because while chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, the words Krishna and Hare immediately remind him of all the Lord's activities. Since his entire life is engaged in service of the Lord, a devotee cannot forget the Lord at any time. There it is. That's our takeaway for today. Oh, and just as an ordinary man always engages his mind in material activities, a devotee always engages his mind in spiritual activities. This is called Brahma Satra, or meditating upon the Supreme Lord always. That should be our culture and life activity. Always being engaged in the devotional service of the Lord in the association of genuine devotees. Then all our problems will go away. And we will have a very peaceful and happy life because we only associate with genuine devotees. Okay, if no other questions, we will adjourn for today.
So, Maharaj, one question.
Yeah.
So, if the family is if the materialistic family is there, then there should not be any attachment. But duty will be there, like service will be there. So, and if the family is a spiritual family, then attachment is that fine?
Is what?
Is the attachment fine for the spiritual family?
Yeah. If they're actually spiritually inclined, yes. But when you say attachment, one is not attached for mundane purpose. Let's say you have a family member and he's sick. Well, you go and try to give some instruction to the family member. But if you go to a family, let's say, wedding, and everybody is just going to be mundane, it's better to just avoid it because you're not going to hear anything that's Krishna conscious. Even the mantras are not going to help very much because everyone's thinking when they're going to stop the mantras and now we can go, start drinking some liquor and beer and dancing and so forth. Yeah, one time I was doing a marriage and the groom was a real nonsense person. He kept saying, when's it going to be finished? When's it going to be finished? Then I realized, I should not do marriages for just anyone. So I stopped doing marriages for mundane people. it was really uncomfortable. I'm saying, mantras and trying to give the bride and the groom good, knowledge or wisdom, and the boy is saying, "When's it going to be over?" Over and over again, he kept saying, "When's it finished?" So he was a real nonsense person. So I really felt bad that I was performing that marriage. So I decided not to do that anymore. To only agree to officiate a marriage when I know for sure that the potential bride and groom are going to be respectful. Okay, well, thank you very much, my dear devotees. Please chant Hare Krishna and be happy today and every day. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Bo, Hare Bo, Hare Bo. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai.